I am wearing a George Reeves Adventures of Superman t-shirt. However, I will be talking about Star Trek. I hope that won't be too confusing for people. So, in my most recent review of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which has been wonderful so far, I mentioned how well I think they're handling Captain Pike knowing his fate, knowing that he is destined to be grievously injured and confined to a beep chair. And in my review, I mentioned that, this is a new show, and even though it is set in a previously established universe and timeline, where Pike will inevitably suffer that injury, and we as the audience know that, and that's part of what makes his character so compelling, that even though that is all true, the producers of Strange New Worlds are making their own show, and if they choose to change that and have Pike avoid that fate ultimately, they can do that because it's all made up. But that I hope they don't do that. And I just wanted to sort of take a few minutes here and expand on why I think it would be a terrible mistake to have Pike escape his fate. Because I think my reasons for thinking that are different than the reasons a lot of folks in the comments of that review have given for wanting the same thing. Like, we agree that it would be a mistake for them to rewrite Star Trek history and have Pike escape his fate. But we have different reasons for that. A lot of the comments I've seen from people saying, yeah, they shouldn't have, they shouldn't change Pike's fate, are rooted in the idea that it would be a change to established canon, that it would be a retcon, and that it would be wrong to change something that has been a firmly established part of Star Trek's fictional history for over 50 years. If that is important to you, and if that is your reason for not wanting them to change Pike's destiny, that's fine. You're entitled to think whatever you want, but I just want to make it clear that my reasons have nothing to do with that. I couldn't care less about that. I don't give a shit. They can change Star Trek canon. They can retcon stuff. As long as it's a good story, they can do whatever the fuck they want. I don't give a shit about maintaining the pre-established history of Star Trek. They can contradict stuff. They can change stuff. They can do whatever they want as long as it yields good stories, right? The reason why I think it would be a terrible mistake to alter Pike's fate is because it weakens him as a character. The fact that we know what Pike's fate is, because we've seen other Star Trek shows, gives his character tragedy, gives his character poignancy. When he and Number One have that conversation near the end of the second episode, where she says, oh, maybe your fate's not written in stone. Maybe you can change it. There's a poignancy there and a sadness there because we know he can't. We know that this is definitely waiting for him, that this is going to happen. It looms in his future. Now, it's far enough in his future that even if Strange New Worlds winds up being a very long-running series, and they get, 6 or 7 years out of it, that it's still far enough in his future that they don't need to depict it at all. They don't need to deal with it directly at all. There doesn't need to be an episode where Pike has that accident. It can still be a few years in his future when the show ends. But I think they still need to leave us with the impression that it is definitely still waiting for him. It is going to happen. If they change that, if they allow him to escape his fate, then you lose a really big part of what makes this version of Pike so compelling. The fact that he knows about it, that he chose that fate. And if you take away that tragic fate that he chose, then it really undermines that choice. Now, all of a sudden, he didn't make such a heroic choice. I mean, he did from his perspective at the time, sure. But in the fullness of the story, it's like he gets out of it. And that's not very dramatically satisfying. When a hero makes a sacrifice and then the sacrifice is undone, and like, oh yeah, it was a nice thought, Chris, but we don't need that anymore. You're good. You can go have a happy life. That's not dramatically satisfying. There's also the idea that Chris talks about in the first episode of Strange New Worlds, that right up until the very end, life is what you make it. And that is a fantastic theme and a fantastic message. because it's the situation that we are all in. Now, we are not all destined to experience catastrophic accidents that will leave us severely disabled and confined to a beep chair, but death is all of our fate. We are all going to die at one point or another. Our lives are finite, so we all have, especially those of us who are atheists and don't believe in any sort of supernatural afterlife, we all have an undesirable fate waiting for us. Our lives are going to end at some point. And that might not make us happy. It certainly doesn't make me happy, but it also doesn't mean that my life up until that point is meaningless. So again, if you take away the end point for Pike, it really dilutes that. It saps that of its power. So that's why I think it would be a mistake to change Pike's fate. A big part of why this version of Pike is so compelling to me is that heroic and tragic layer that is added to him as a result of him knowing his fate, and we also know his fate. We understand that this is something that he will not be able to avoid, and maybe he could even come to believe at some point, to hope that he can escape his fate, that he can change his future. And then it becomes even more tragic because we know that he can't. And that's drama, and that's tragedy, and that's compelling, and that's heartbreaking, and that's art. That's good stuff. And yes, of course, I like Chris. I like him as a character. If he were a real person, I would like him very much as a real person. I wouldn't want something bad to happen to him. I would hope that he could avoid that accident and change his fate somehow. But that's part of what makes the story so compelling. Sometimes, quite often in fact, what would be the best thing for a character if they were a real person is not the best thing for them in a story. If you are a writer, if you are a creator and you're telling a story, your duty, at least as I see it, this is just how I see this, and you're free to disagree with this, and I'm sure some of you do, but your duty as a storyteller is to the story, to tell the story the best way that you can tell it. And if the best way to tell the story is to have your heroic, admirable, extremely likable characters suffer a tragic fate, then that's what you should do. Even if you really like them, even if you think they're great, even if they don't deserve whatever happens, if that is the best choice for the story, then that's what you need to do. And if it means breaking the audience's heart, you know what? Some of the best stories ever told are stories that absolutely rip your heart from your chest, that break you, that make you cry, that make you feel something for an imaginary person, for a person who does not exist except on a page or on a screen or in your imagination. And that is beautiful. That is so beautiful. You ever think about how beautiful it is that you can just hear a piece of music and be moved to tears, or read a book, or see actors act out an imaginary story on a screen, and they're play acting. They are pretending to be people that don't exist, and yet they touch you in your heart and they move you. They make you feel real emotion. You connect with them. You invest in them. That's art. That's magic. That's a wonderful thing, even if it makes us sad sometimes. The fact that it can make us sad, the fact that it can make us feel real things is beautiful. And I would not want to risk that. I would not want to change that. That's where I'm coming from on it. It's completely about the needs as I see them of the story and the character. And changing that ending, changing his fate, guts the character and guts the story. And I would hate to see that happen because I'm really invested in this very tragic version of Pike's story. And it has nothing to do with the continuity thing, with the canon thing. I could care less about that. Honestly, if I thought the best ending for this version of Pike, or this show in general, was to change his fate, to change established canon, I would say do it. If I was running the show and I had permission to do that from the studio that controls the IP, and they said, yeah, do whatever you want, And I thought that was the best thing for the story, to rewrite Star Trek history. I would do that in a heartbeat and not lose a single night's sleep over it, because I would be serving my story. And if fans need to come up with a headcanon to explain it away, or if the producers of subsequent shows need to come up with another thing to justify it, like saying that, oh, actually it took place in a different timeline, or when that happened, it branched off into an alternate reality, or come up with some way of retconning my retcon and undoing it, like they start a new episode where number one wakes up and hears the shower running, and she walks into the bathroom and there's Pike in the beep chair in the shower, and he turns around and looks at her and she's like, oh, Chris? And he goes, beep, beep, beep. Because 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 for good morning. Whatever they have to do, that's their business. They can do whatever they feel they need to do. That's not my problem. My concern, my focus is the show I'm making and what is the best choice for my show and my story and my characters that I'm telling stories about right now. Pike is a tragic figure, and that's what gives him power. That's what makes him compelling. That's what gives him the ability to grab us and to move us. And I would hate to see him or this so far excellent show robbed of that. So there you go. Feel free to disagree in the comments. Thanks for watching, everybody.